Welcome to the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast, where we discuss topics related to sterile and non-sterile compounding pharmacy in an effort to promote compliance and increase quality. Please welcome your hosts, Brian Prince and Seth DePasquale.
Hello and welcome to the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast. Today we have on our show a friend and pharmacist, Bill Fixler, who's just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to compounding. He co-owns multiple pharmacies and is in the process of opening a 503B. We're going to be talking about some of the differences in 503As and 503Bs and what Bill's experience was like transitioning into that world. But first, let's let Bill, in his own words, tell you a little bit about himself.
Yeah, my name is Bill. I'm a pharmacist, and before pharmacy school, I got a degree in microbiology at Arizona State, and went to pharmacy school at Midwestern. My wife went to Auburn Pharmacy School, and met her in Arizona, and I liked it a little bit greener. Arizona was getting a little crowded, so it was a natural thing. Happy wife, happy life. I enjoyed Alabama. It was a small town feel. It was great to one day open a pharmacy. All through school, it was all compounding for me. It was either going to do that, be a surgeon, or do patent law. So it was anything with, dealing with more of the manufacturing compounding side. And, I did rotations through, Avella at the time. It was different, but all of the big compounders out of Arizona. And came to Alabama, worked at Walgreens nights and saved my money. And I opened my first store, which was Inverness Apothecary right here on Highway 280, and then just expanded where I kind of was in one state. I did sterile and non-sterile, and I kind of grew. And then what happened was I had so much business in certain states. Sometimes I was going to open a store in Ohio, for example. Another one was in Arizona. But I had a really strong backbone in Texas. And so some guys, we were talking about opening one in Arizona. They pleaded and begged and said, "Come on, man, we want you to do one in Texas." So that's how the North Dallas store kind of opened. And then I got another guy that went to school with me, very good friends, and he moved to South Texas where he was at, and that's how that store opened up. And then I also had two stores in North Alabama that I eventually sold. And so now I'm a part of three. And then recently I had a new partner come in to really expand going in the future of sterile and, just constantly expanding. So our goal is to open a couple more this year and into next year and actually go international. So.
Wow. And all those, like the ones in Texas, are those all compounding pharmacies too?
Yeah, every single one of my stores that I'm a part of, all compounds. The South Texas store is a retail store that does compounding, but they're more for the local environment. The Dallas store, I call it Dallas, but it's really Murphy, Texas. It was as well to hit the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's like a small little economy. But I started seeing the way insurances were going to pay and not pay for compounding. And so where many people were still compounding on insurance and dealing with that in 2015 and 16, I actually stopped years before that and went to an all cash model in Birmingham. And then I started doing specialty, and everything that I learned from that, I then consulted my stores in Texas. And so my store in Texas is not just a PCAB accredited pharmacy, but they're also ACHC for specialty, and they're also URAC accredited as well.
Wow.
So we do a lot of, we have two different softwares, one for compounding, but, we've got the full CPR Plus. We're into IMS reporting. We've got limited contracts. And so we're into infertility. So there's a huge amount of specialty that we do in that store that's growing. So matter of fact, in 3 weeks, we're moving into the new location, brand new facility that we built.
So we could, honestly, with Bill, we could really talk about so many different aspects of pharmacy, not only compounding, but specialty and
compounding,
and
specialty.
retail.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of in a natural progression where everyone was doing compounding. And then everyone wanted to get into specialty, thinking that's where was the next wave. But I always seen things 3 steps ahead. I see where specialty has its benefits and disadvantages. But my home, where I feel more comfortable, is not just compounding. It's actually, I really feel more at home with sterile. And it has to deal with my personality of just who I am. I like to tell myself that I'm not a type A, but I think I'm like a type A that's medicated. I'm a little in between of an A and a B. But I just love that form of control and focusing on quality and embracing of putting out the absolute best product you can. And when you do compounding and you start getting into sterile, you can make that so finite and reproducible. That's what attracts me to sterile. I just love it because, I don't know, my micro background, I have no idea. But
Yeah, I think that's what you and I like. You say a lot of the same things that I say and think a lot of the same thoughts that I have. So when you and I first started talking, it just seemed like it was great to find somebody that just honestly gets it. But
well,
what's
there's comparisons in, like, for example, I'm into cooking, and so I think compounders are naturally into cooking or something like that. And I bring up the point of, I was in Vegas, and the chef of the century has the most Michelin stars is Joel Robuchon. And I watched him cook and, everything. And the guy will take a steak and will literally measure it and cut it the same thickness, length, width, everything, exactly the same every time. So when you go into his restaurant today, or if you go to Morocco, or if you go to Tokyo, that steak tastes exactly the same. And that's what they strive in the French cuisine world, of taking something and making it the same. And people go, well, how big is that? And I go, well, how let down are you when you go through a McDonald's drive-through and you're craving those nice, crunchy, salty French fries, and they're cold, soggy, and unsalted? There's a lack of quality. And you can see just in making French fries, it can be like a big letdown.
Yeah.
So that's, I look at that and go, okay, they're not under quality. So
yeah. That definitely speaks to a lot of the things, a lot of the issues within compounding pharmacy, and this whole transition with the FDA coming into the space and really trying to regulate us a little bit closer, which is kind of what is unique about you. You not only have own and have operated 503As, but you are also in the 503B space as well. And it's obviously directly regulated by the FDA. You have to have them come in and inspect you for the first time, and then you're going to get inspections every year or 2 thereafter. So what was the big deciding factor for you going in and making that transition into 503B? What was it, a business decision, or what was it?
I think there was 2. One is, obviously, there's the the unloved decision by the FDA of compounding for office use needs to be done in a 503B. Many people have an issue with that, where I can see their point. I also can see the point of when you're, like I talked before, when you're making up a French fry batch at a store down the street, and then you start making it, in another city. Is it that big of a deal that they were kind of and you got to go back and get another one? It's not that big of a deal. But the plant that makes those French fries and cuts those potatoes, if they weren't doing it in a quality standpoint, you could have tainted meat, like we saw with Jack in the Box, and get E. coli, and it could be very detrimental. And so when you go to do something on a small scale, patient here, patient there, typically your batches are not large. They don't become too cumbersome. Some of the equipment that we use in compounding, from unguators, these different things, the max you can put is about 1,000 grams or 1 kilo.
Right.
So sometimes people then start moving to kitchen equipment. Things start mixing differently, and unfortunately, pharmacists, we're very good at knowing a lot about medications and what they do, and we can really dive into what's the active ingredients that we want to use and all of that. But where we lacked in school and being trained was the unknowns. And some people say, well, Bill, it's not that big of a deal. Well, it actually is. That scientific part of it, of wanting to get those knowns and to control the batches as they grow, that's why they want it under a GMP type mentality. You've got small stores when they're running something here and there, but when they start compounding for alpha sheets, you then can easily grow to larger batches, and then you can basically get out of the realm of being able to control it. So I understand the FDA that they need to be there for that, because very quickly your tort, or what you can hurt something with, instead of it being limited to 1 or 2 patients, could be drastically large. But for me, I mean, where was that issue? I worked with a dentist for about 2 years, 3 years, and we designed something for periodontal disease that was really better than anything on the market. Try to go through FDA approval process, and a lot of these things made it very difficult. It's an old API that's been around, and really didn't care about the patent and trying to protect yourself, but it was just a monumental task to be able to take that to market and then help people. I've always wanted to get automatic machines, from vial filling machines, capsule machines, always. But the fear was always, if you do that, you look like a manufacturer. And so I think there were compounders that for years held off. And now with the 503B, to me, I feel more comfortable there. I actually enjoy it better than a 503A, because I can now go into using machines and be able to, it's just a whole new world for me to explore. But I knew that I had a product that we basically make up for the dentist to use under the gum line, non-invasive, non-traumatizing to the patient. And it's been done for 30 years. And so I said, well, I guess I'll go to the 503B route. And one of the benefits was I could actually do some sterile that I used to do in a more quality type atmosphere, being able to use machines and less human intervention. And so that drove me to want to, take that on.
Yeah, it's almost like, we, like you said, pharmacists are we're very good with the medications, and and compounders are very creative, and we are able to do some pretty cool stuff, but we are a little bit hindered by that fear. And I've talked to Brian about this too, that fear of it's going to be considered manufacturing if I get to that level. And it's just, it is what it is. But, at the same time, once you get to that level, you are able to get more equipment, more machinery that actually makes the whole process safer from the standpoint of quality and quality control, quality assurance, and all that kind of stuff. So, as you're scaling up, you're actually probably going to see not only more efficiencies, but you're also going to potentially see, depending on what hands you're that are going to be dealing with it, but you're probably going to see safer processes as well. So, yeah.
I remember, even if you said, hey, I'm going to make up cookies or something like that, you get back into cooking, and people would say, well, I make a double batch. Okay, great. And then I come in and say, make a 20 batch in a single batch. And you look and go, well, I don't have the equipment to do that. Okay, so I'll try to make it. And what happens is it doesn't mix the right way. It just doesn't come out. And so I think with us as pharmacists, we're constantly pushed, no lunches, no breaks. And we do very well on a quality standpoint when we're verifying a prescription. How many people put a line on the counter and say, don't cross this line, and we're going to do a 10-point check, and it's going to be the name and the date of birth. And so in those small little, I call them squares in a retail pharmacy, that is quality. But not when you start compounding and things like that. We never really drove into that because let's face it, all we're doing is making sure the label goes on the bottle. And so that's a
Yeah.
labeling standpoint is what we're looking at, and drug interactions. When we start dealing with making things and those kind of, I mean, it's just some people, it's just not in the mindset to, a lot of the times the attitude is, well, it's good enough. I mean, it's non-sterile, no big deal. I constantly push the envelope. Most people would say that they're scared of the state boards. I have no problem with state boards, but I actually feel more comfortable with the FDA than I do with state boards, just because they come from quality. The rules are written with an open booklet, allowing you to take your scientific data and create what you need to do. So this whole quality by design. Unfortunately, with pharmacists and in the pharmacy world with compounding, because we don't do all of the process validations and all of those things, there's been these artificial walls that have been put in place. I call them like cliff notes, like 795 and 797. And while they're there, the problem is, by doing the cliff notes, then no one ever goes and reads the book.
Right.
And so they're at a disadvantage. And so that's my problem is, some people don't even read the 70 pages, the 74 pages of 797. And, are we ever taught to question, you're supposed to grow TSA for bacteria and, dextrose for, fungal? Well, is that really the best, medium for your area? And so we're kind of being spoon-fed. And I like the fact to take something from the very beginning, run through the whole thing, analyze everything, and then create my own quality system that I feel, works within that environment. 797 and 797, I think, are great for ideas. They kind of simplify it for people, but there are times where people, when they start compounding, and that's the problem, when people are 797 compliant and think that they can go and make 50,000 vial batch, I'm sorry, this is not going to happen. Even me, I would not be able to do that. I would have to bend the rules of 797 or purposely break some compliant issue with 797. And you've got to know, if you're going to go outside of those realms, what are you looking at? What are your repercussions? So.
Yeah, I think if you're operating within the standards of 797, they're really not meant for large scale manufacturing.
Exactly.
For sure.
It's just exactly.
But you touched on a whole bunch of things there that we talk about all the time, that you and I talk about all the time, that pharmacists typically are being spoon-fed things from 795, 797, and the whole idea of what the FDA, how the FDA thinks, is it's a totally different mindset. You are able to get, you can go from point A to point B, and the FDA, almost, I hate to say they don't care how you get there, but if you can show scientifically backed reasoning how you got there and why you're doing it the way you're doing it, they'd be like, okay, cool. So they're not so hung up on the minutia that seemingly what USP 797 and 795 tend to like operate within. It's just a different mindset, and in that, like, was that an obstacle for you going from 503A to B? Like, how did you make that transition? Was it or was it not difficult at all for you?
I would like to think that it was quick and easy, but it wasn't. I don't think it was a struggle, but I think in the beginning, we all have this fear of FDA, that they're bad, that it's all of these things. And I think the fear of the FDA comes from state boards, it comes from the public, it comes from big pharma, super expensive, they can shut big pharma down. If you really look to see what the FDA does, it wasn't really until I actually openly engaged with the FDA. Every time I've ever emailed or called the FDA, they have picked up that phone, or they've returned their email, they've returned a phone call. I have not yet met an FDA person that is not doing something where they are truly passionate about what they're doing, and they believe that they're basically doing everything for the betterment of the public. I mean, just looking out for the public. And so, whether you agree or not, should we respect them? Obviously, they have the same, vigor and the wanting of doing it right that us pharmacists. Us pharmacists don't want to make a misfill, even in working in a groceries, retail pharmacy grocery store. So they have that same fire and passion. It's just trying to understand where they're coming from. I think that they've been around. It's just there's been many things that has happened in the last 2 or 3 decades, just in the last I think vital push with big pharma. In the 40s and the 50s, 60s, even 70s, it was not really too much. It's really been from the 80s going forward, and they've been there, they've seen it, and so I just look at them as someone to go to. Open, free consultation. I always had that fear. When I got over that fear and actually engaged them, and then I actually one time just took the inspection form, the form that every FDA person will inspect a facility, and looked at it and looked at the questions. They were common sense questions. They were questions that if you were to go in and do an interview for someone that you wanted to hire for your business, if you were looking for the best accountant, you would first look to see what kind of experience they had. You would then formulate your questions. You would go in there and ask, do you do tax returns? And then say, do you know federal tax return laws, or are you better at state? They're trying to see who you are, and they're doing an assessment of you. When I really started to see really that's what they were about, I'm actually delighted when they come in, because they come in with a different purview. They come in with a different angle, looking at your things, and they're there to help you. And so, I embrace the FDA. I actually, nothing's perfect, but I will say they actually really do a good job, especially to the 503Bs. And I think they've really tried to learn. They've been very open of trying to make this work. They've been very proactive and forward with the State Board of Pharmacies of, trying to get in there. I just think it's really bad when we just want to take the FDA or someone like that and then just shove them out. Many times they can come in, they can look at something and say, here's an idea. Maybe you would want to do this. Turn you back over to the board and walk away. That's valuable advice because they've been there and they've seen many other places. So I think the probably the most difficult thing for me is because CGMP is an open blanket of, I call them very loose words like, well-lit facility. Well, what does that mean? I mean, it's left for interpretation. Where 797 is very specific. State boards now are inspecting on a very specific black and white 20 question, here you go. And that is a problem when you really start looking at, inspecting places. For example, the reason why the FDA has it so ambiguous is you might be a 2-man operation, you might be a 1,000-person operation. The state board, because it's so limited for small batching, it's also very guided to a small little retail pharmacy. And if you become large, if you start doing things outside of that box, sometimes it doesn't make sense. I'll give you an example. Questionnaire that you fill out for like an insurance company. You might fill out an application for a state board, and all of them will say, compliance officer, do you have one? Yes or no? And the second question will be, does your compliance officer have sterile training? Well, that might be great for a state pharmacy for a 503A, but a 503B, what does compliance officer have to do with anything about sterile? They may need to know it, they may not. They're dealing with compliance. They might be the one responsible for making sure all of your licenses are in check, things like that. The person that looks to make sure you're doing it within compliance, so to speak, is your quality people. The number one thing that the FDA, every single time they come in, there's 4 sections they go, but the one they will always look at is quality. So they're looking at a quality assurance. That's what they are. And so many times it's very difficult to try to answer questions because they don't apply. And so those are, I think, some of the issues. But again, it's, it happens.
That brings up an interesting point. Like, so I actually know a quality assurance manager that was manager of Mallinckrodt here in Paris, Kentucky for many, many years. He's retired, but I don't really know. I honestly I don't know what his background was. He always says that he was a farm boy just from Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he has an education of some sort, but it speaks to the point that like you don't necessarily have to have a degree in sterile manufacturing to be a compliance officer or quality assurance person. So, with that, like the quality assurance people that you've had come in, what are their backgrounds? Like what do their backgrounds look like?
I actually know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Kentucky.
Yeah, I thought you did.
Some of the people that I would say most of the people that have come in as quality assurance, I have 2 of them. A lot of them have a chemistry background. With chemistry, they're very analytical. Quality is all about looking at an issue and then doing a root cause analysis. I worked at Walgreens for many years, and OOS always meant out of stock, but it's out of spec. Getting to that root cause of why something went wrong, even if it was something so simple, to document it. And so document control, looking at the root cause of what happened, where was it, at the laboratory? Was it within the room? Was it the person? Was it the equipment? What was it? And many times that data, if it's, a lot of times in pharmacies, we go, oh, well, just don't go, stay away from over here and you'll be fine. And so it becomes these, I call them on the jobs, don't do's. But quality is typically the end all say all. What the FDA wanted to do, starting like in the 70s, was when they come in, they're doing an assessment of the building from your HVAC all the way down to your process. And they want to make sure that you're under control. They want to see that when you set it up in 1983, and now it's 1995, and you've had 5,000 employees come through that building, are they still trained exactly the same way, or have you made changes? And if you made changes, do they all stay within the same, confinement so that you have the same expected results on the other end? The FDA really would like someone to be in every facility doing a quality assessment. The problem is the assurance. The FDA cannot do an assurance officer for every facility. So now what big happened with Big Pharma is they started creating a department called Quality Assurance. They are basically your own hired FDA, and they're standalone away from management. How many times do you see that the PIC is the compliance officer? It might be great, but in Big Pharma, that's not. Quality assurance are people removed from management that, for the most part, may have a little bit of ownership, but they are a standalone. They answer to management for the fact of, you hire me, you fire me, but they have the ability to shut something down and no one can override them. So think of them as your own internal FDA. Many people are scared of that. If you look at all of the regs, they look at all of your SOPs, all of your results, all of your out of specs, all of that. When you go to do your own quality assurance or you do your own internal audits, things like that, unless it's through subpoena and some of these different avenues, all of your assurance stuff is all off. They don't look at that. Because what they want is they want an open communication of people to be able to come forward, see something wrong, talk about it, and then fix the problem. If everyone was scared that every time they saw an issue, they would never come forward. So for the FDA, they typically will, and they'll look at it if you leave it there. So when people say, I'm going to do a gap analysis, I'm going to do a quality assurance check, all of that stuff stays for internal use only, and it's not purview to the FDA. And so I like that avenue. I like that aspect. We never did that in 503 pharmacies, but I can tell you it's really amazing when you start seeing how much quality and documentation that you do for the GMP side of it. You really do see that, things will change and they drift.
Wow, this was such an incredible show. Like I said, Bill has so much information and is honestly just a great guy to talk to. I really appreciate him coming on and speaking with us about his crossing over into GMP territory. This conversation was just a really small portion of what we talked about, and I'm going to make the rest of it available to everyone who wants to listen. So there was so much more that we talked about, but in the interest of not making this a 2-hour show, I had to cut it down. So a link will be available soon. So thanks again for joining us this week, and if you're at ASHP Midyear, stop by the New Air booth number 1650, where my podcast co-host Brian Prince will be, and say hello. He's available to answer your questions, and of course he's just a great guy to talk to. So check him out. Thanks for listening, and keep raising the bar.